The sound woke him before the sun did. A soft, frightened whinny that didn't belong in his barn at 5 in the morning. Mark Holloway sat up straight in his bed, heart thumping. He'd been a rancher in northern Colorado his entire life. He knew every noise his animals made, knew the difference between a restless horse, a hungry calf, and a raccoon trying to sneak into the feed room. But this sound was none of those. He pulled on his boots, grabbed his jacket, and stepped outside into the cold dawn air. The sky was still dark, a thin gray line just starting to appear over the ridge. Mark pushed open the barn door, the hinges creaking sharply in the quiet morning. Inside, his gelding Trigger lifted his head but stayed calm. His old mare, Lily, didn't even bother to wake up fully. Nothing was wrong with them. The sound came again, faint and shaky from the very back of the barn. Mark tightened his grip on the flashlight and walked down the aisle, each step echoing against the wooden walls. When he reached the last stall, the one he used for storing tools and extra hay, he stopped cold. A foal stood alone in the corner. Her tiny legs were spread awkwardly the way newborns stand before they learn their balance. Her coat was dark, almost black, but already showing the early softness of a gray that would lighten with age. She looked no more than 3 or 4 days old. Her sides rose and fell quickly, not in fear but confusion. She was too young to understand why she was alone. Mark felt his throat tighten. "What on earth?" he whispered. He swung the flashlight across the stall. Someone had spread fresh straw. A clean bucket of water sat in the corner. A small bag of expensive mare's milk replacer leaned against the wall. This wasn't an accident. Someone had prepared this. The foal tried to step toward him but wobbled dangerously. That's when Mark noticed something tied to her tiny halter, baling twine, knotted carefully, holding a folded piece of paper. His hands shook as he untied it. The note was written in blue ink. The handwriting was slow and shaky, but gentle, like the writer had taken time to steady each letter. "Mr. Holloway, her name is Grace. She is 4 days old. I cannot keep her, and I cannot explain why. But she is good. She is everything bright and hopeful in this world. Please don't let her end up at auction. Please give her a chance to be what she was born to be. I know you are a kind man. I've seen how you treat your horses. One day you will understand why I had to do this. I'm sorry I can't stay. I'm sorry for a lot of things, but I'm not sorry she exists. Thank you for saving her life." There was no signature. Mark blinked hard and read the note again. And again. The letters swam as his eyes filled. He hadn't cried in years, not since the day he buried his wife Emily under the cottonwood tree by the creek. But now tears pushed forward, uninvited and unstoppable. The foal nickered softly and touched her nose to his hand. "Well, little one," he whispered, "looks like you're mine for now." Mark Holloway had not expected to be raising a newborn foal at 58 years old. He had planned a quiet life, running his 90-acre ranch, tending cattle, and taking care of the 2 horses he still kept for company. His daughters were grown and lived in Denver. His wife had been gone for 8 years. Some folks called him lonely, but he thought of his life as steady, predictable, peaceful. This was something else entirely. Raising an orphan foal was a full-time battle. Fragile creatures, needing to eat every 2 hours, day and night. Needing warmth, careful feeding, and constant attention. And worst of all, he didn't know if this foal had gotten her first milk, the colostrum that built a newborn's immune system. If she hadn't, she might not make it. Mark set the flashlight between 2 boards and opened the milk replacer. It was the good kind, the expensive kind, the kind that showed whoever abandoned her cared deeply. Someone had tried. Someone had loved her. But someone had also been desperate. He filled the bottle, warmed it, and knelt by the wobbling foal. She sniffed the nipple, confused, then bumped it with her nose. Milk splashed onto Mark's jacket. "It's okay," he said softly. "We'll figure it out." It took nearly 20 minutes, but finally Grace latched. Once she figured it out, she drained the bottle fast, her tiny tail twitching with pure contentment. Milk dripped from her whiskers. Mark checked her carefully. pink gums, bright eyes, no fever, clean umbilical stump. Whoever cared for her these 4 days had done well. But the question burned in his mind. Who had brought her here? His ranch sat 6 miles from the nearest neighbor. The road was long and rough. You didn't end up on his property by accident. Someone drove here in the dead of night. Someone knew where he lived. Someone knew how he treated his horses. By noon, Grace had already stolen a piece of his heart. By sundown, he'd read the note a dozen times. By midnight, as he sat beside her stall feeding her another warm bottle, he knew one thing for certain. Someone out there was desperate. Someone out there trusted him. And someone out there was hiding something big. He just didn't know what yet. And Grace couldn't tell him, but he would find out. The second week passed in a blur of sleepless nights, bottle feedings, and constant worry. Mark set alarms every 2 hours, stumbling into the barn at all hours of the night with a warm bottle tucked inside his jacket. Grace grew stronger each day. Her wobbly legs steadied. Her tiny tail flicked with excitement every time she saw him. She learned his voice. She followed him around her stall like he was the only thing in the world she trusted. The bond came fast. Faster than Mark expected. Faster than he wanted to admit. But the questions grew just as quickly. He kept reading the note, tracing the shaky handwriting with his thumb. Someone knew him. Someone knew his land, his habits, his heart. Someone believed he was the only person who could save this foal. But why him? And why in secret? On a Monday morning, he drove into town to pick up more milk replacer. The feed store owner, Hank, looked up as he walked in. "Well, look who finally crawled out of the barn," Hank said. "I heard you got yourself a baby." Mark froze. "Heard from who?" Hank shrugged. "Small town. Word travels. Someone saw a trailer driving toward your place around midnight last week. Folks figured you bought a foal." Mark felt a cold prickle crawl up his neck. He hadn't bought anything. Someone had delivered Grace like a stolen package. "You ever heard of any mares dropping a gray foal lately?" Mark asked casually. Hank shook his head. "Not around here. Most folks call Doc Taylor when a mare's about to foal. I haven't heard of any gray babies this season." Mark pressed a little harder at the vet clinic in the next town. Same answer. No gray foals. No recent births. No injured mares. Nothing. It made no sense. Back at the ranch, Grace was waiting for him, bright-eyed, hungry, and happy. She nuzzled into his chest when he stepped into the stall, and he felt his heart crack just a little more. Whoever left her, they loved her. That night, around 3 a.m., when the world was quiet and the barn lantern cast a soft glow across the stalls, he sat beside her and spoke aloud for the first time. "Who do you belong to, little girl?" Grace blinked at him with shiny, trusting eyes. He sighed. "We're going to figure this out." Quote. 2 more weeks passed before something strange happened. One morning, while Grace played in the small paddock beside the barn, Mark noticed a car parked at the far end of his driveway. A beige sedan. Old. Dusty. Someone was sitting inside. Engine running. Mark wiped his hands on his jeans and walked toward it. But the moment he stepped off the porch, the driver slammed the car into gear and sped off, kicking up gravel. He didn't get a license plate, didn't get a clear look at the driver. Just a shadow. A shape. But someone had been watching. That night, he tossed and turned in bed, replaying the moment. Whoever was in that car knew exactly where to park to see the barn without being seen from the house. Someone had been here before. The next day, he did something he hadn't done in years. He called the sheriff's office. Deputy Amanda Clark showed up within an hour, stepping out of her cruiser with a notepad in hand. "You found a foal," she said, looking both confused and curious. "And someone tied a note to her halter?" Mark nodded and handed her the folded paper. She read the note twice, then looked at Grace, who was peeking over the stall door with her soft gray eyes. "This isn't some kid prank," Amanda said. "Someone poured their heart into this." "That's what scares me," Mark replied. "They knew me. They knew how I treat horses. And today someone was parked at the end of my drive watching the barn." Amanda frowned. "Did you get a good look?" "No, but it wasn't a ranch truck. It was a car. Small, older. She wrote everything down, then sighed. "I'll drive around, ask questions. But I'm going to be honest, Mark. Whoever left this foal with you didn't dump her to die. They dropped her off to save her. They trusted you." He already knew that, but trust came with responsibility. After Amanda left, Mark went to check on Grace. She was running around her paddock, kicking at the air, full of life. When she saw him, she trotted over and pressed her forehead against his chest. He scratched her neck gently. "You're a special one," he murmured. "Someone risked everything to bring you to me." Quote. She lifted her head and looked at him with those deep, shining eyes that reminded him of something he couldn't quite place, something familiar, something that tugged at his memory like a half-forgotten dream. Later that week, the answer arrived in the most unexpected way. Mark was picking up feed when an older woman, Mary Allen, owner of a small breeding farm 15 miles away, looked at a photo of Grace on his phone and froze. "Mark," she whispered, "I know that foal." He felt his heartbeat spike. "Whose is she?" Mary swallowed hard before answering. "She looks just like a filly out of Silver's Promise. That mare belongs to a young woman who disappeared from the hospital 2 months ago after a bad riding accident." She hesitated, eyes darkening. Nobody's seen her since. A chill ran through Mark so fast he had to steady himself against the counter. Grace whinnied softly behind him, unaware that the truth of her past was about to unravel a story far bigger, darker, and more heartbreaking than he ever imagined. Mark didn't sleep that night. He kept replaying Mary's words, every sentence heavier than the last. A young woman who disappeared. A mare named Silver's Promise. A foal that looked just like Grace. And a hospital stay that ended without answers. He fed Grace at midnight, then again at 2, then again at 4. Each time he walked back to the house, the same questions circled in his mind. Who was the woman? Why had she disappeared? And what danger had Grace been saved from? By sunrise, Mark made up his mind. He drove back to Mary's farm. Mary met him at the gate, worry etched into her face. "I need her name," Mark said, "the woman who owned the mare." Mary nodded slowly. "Her name is Abigail Turner. She's 26, rides Reiners, good horsewoman, lived alone on her family's small place near the state line." "And the accident?" Mary exhaled. "She was thrown hard. Broken ribs, head injury, fractured pelvis. She nearly died. She was in the hospital for weeks." "Then she disappeared?" "Yes. The nurses said she checked herself out. But her brother told folks she had a breakdown, that she wasn't stable enough to be on her own." Mark stiffened. "Her brother?" Quote, "Tom Turner. He's been running her place since the accident. Sold some horses. Sold equipment. That mare, Silver's Promise, was Abby's favorite. A good mare. She should have had a foal this year." Mark didn't need Mary to finish the sentence. Grace wasn't just any foal. She was Abby Turner's foal. "Where's Abby now?" he asked quietly. Mary shook her head. "Nobody knows." A weight settled deep in Mark's chest. He thanked Mary and drove home with the windows down, cold air slapping his face, trying to think through the storm inside his mind. When he pulled into the driveway, something felt off. Grace wasn't calling from her paddock. Lily and Trigger were restless, and the barn door. It was wide open. Mark's stomach dropped. He sprinted toward the barn. Grace was in her stall, but she wasn't alone. A woman sat in the straw beside her, holding Grace's head in her lap. Her long brown hair was tangled. Her clothes were dusty, her cheeks streaked with tears. But her hands were gentle, experienced, familiar. Grace relaxed against her like she knew her. The woman looked up when Mark stepped inside. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice shaking. "I know I shouldn't be here." Mark knew instantly. "Abigail Turner," he said. She nodded weakly. "I didn't know where else to go." He knelt slowly, hands open. "You're safe here. Grace is safe." Abby closed her eyes and let out a trembling breath. "I've been watching from the road. I saw you feeding her, taking care of her, loving her. Why didn't you come sooner?" Quote, "My brother," she whispered, fear flickering across her face. "He wanted the horses sold. All of them. He said I wasn't fit to own anything." That the foal would be worth good money. He said he'd sell her the moment she was strong enough. Her voice broke. I couldn't let that happen. Promise is gentle and sweet. She never deserved the life he was pushing on her. And Grace was all I had left. Quote, Mark swallowed hard. So you brought her to me. I saw you once, Abby said, wiping her eyes. At the winter clinic in Cheyenne. You were patient with a colt nobody else could handle. You didn't yell, you didn't force, you just waited. And that colt trusted you. I knew if I left Grace with you, she'd be safe. Mark felt the truth of those words hit somewhere deep. That note, he murmured, it tore me apart. Abby gave him a weak smile. Me too, but I had to disappear for a while. My brother filed for guardianship. He wanted control of everything. I ran before he could take Grace. She looked at him with eyes full of fear and hope. I didn't think you'd ever find me. I didn't even think you'd try. I just needed someone to protect her. Mark reached out and rested a hand on the foal's fuzzy forehead. Grace pressed into his touch. You did the right thing, he said quietly, and you came back at the right time. Just then, a vehicle pulled into the driveway, tires on gravel, heavy, fast. Abby flinched. No, she whispered. It's him. Mark stood and walked out of the barn in long, determined strides. A black truck skidded to a stop. Tom Turner jumped out, tall and red-faced, anger written all over him. Where is she? He snapped. Where's my sister? And where's the foal that belongs to me? Mark stepped forward, blocking the barn door. She doesn't belong to you, and neither does the foal. Tom sneered. She's incompetent. The court papers prove it. No judge has ruled anything yet, Mark said calmly, and she's not alone anymore. Tom shoved him. Mark held his ground. Before the fight could escalate, another vehicle pulled in, a sheriff's cruiser. Deputy Amanda stepped out, hand on her hip. Morning, boys, she said. I'd ask what the shouting is about, but I already know. Tom's face turned from red to pale. This is family business. Not when guardianship fraud is involved, Amanda replied. Not when you're selling off a woman's property before the court decides anything. Tom tried to argue, but Amanda shut him down fast. She escorted him to the cruiser while another deputy arrived to take statements. Hours passed, Abby cried. Grace slept. The sun crossed the sky and dipped low again. By evening, Tom Turner was in custody for fraud and illegal sale of assets. And Abby, she finally breathed easy. That night, sitting on the porch with Grace curled up in the barn behind them, Abby looked at Mark with tired, grateful eyes. I don't know how to repay you, she said. You don't need to. Abby smiled softly. Promise we'll need a new place when I'm able to bring her home. Grace, too. Maybe I could stay nearby, start over, build something again. Mark felt something warm spread in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. You wouldn't have to do it alone, he said gently. She looked at him, really looked, and nodded. The months that followed changed everything. Abby healed, slowly, steadily. Grace grew, strong, brave, and beautiful. And Mark's quiet ranch became a place of new beginnings. 2 years later, they stood at a small local show, Abby holding Grace, now a polished young mare, by the lead line. Grace stood tall, silver coat shining. Abby squeezed Mark's hand. She was never abandoned, she said quietly. She was saved. Mark nodded. She saved us too. Quote, and as Grace stepped into the arena, the crowd watching her with admiration, Mark realized something true and simple. Sometimes the greatest blessings arrive in the dark, tied with baling twine, carrying a note written by shaking hands. And sometimes the foal you save ends up saving you right back.